Hey everybody, Evan Ronan here. Tip number 4 for writers is all about how we conjure up ideas. So I have gotten a lot of emails from other writers and sometimes readers too who are just curious. They'll ask me, geez, where do you get all your ideas from? And I always have a hard time answering this question, and I give the rather unhelpful answer of, well, ideas are just everywhere. I think for me personally, it's I have been trying to tell stories for so long, ever since I was 8 or 9 years old, and writing my own Dragon's Lair fan fiction. I've been doing it for such a long time now that it's kind of just second nature. My brain will just go ahead and all of a sudden, oh wait, here's another idea for a story. Here's another one, and sometimes it's actually annoying because I'll be working on a story and I'll get ideas for 3 other completely different stories in different genres, and then I'll get really pumped up about writing those, but I need to focus on what I'm doing. So anyway, if you're struggling to come up with ideas, there are some things you can do. One of the things that helped me in my paranormal series was literally doing a Google search. So my paranormal series has a protagonist who is an expert ghost hunter, and one day, just for kind of laughs, I had already had plenty of ideas for more books in the series, but just for laughs, I Googled ghost news stories, or search terms that were pretty similar to those. And lo and behold, the first story that popped up on the screen was about a man somewhere in America, I forget where, who had been arrested and charged with assaulting his wife or girlfriend. And his defense was that he hadn't done it. A ghost had done it. A ghost had beaten up his significant other. Now, obviously, I didn't believe that story, and I think that probably no one would believe that story. But it was so bizarre, and after I got over my initial disbelief, and nobody would actually make that argument. I said to myself, well, what if it actually happened that way? What if that were true? Wouldn't that be an interesting story? So rather than just have it be an assault, for my particular story, I turned it into a murder. This is a dramatic trick. Murder is much more interesting, for lack of a better word, than just an assault. It just raises the stakes up a lot higher. So I took this news story. All of a sudden, I had the opening of a book that fully formed in my mind. I had a kind of a cold opening with a murder, followed quickly by the man's arrest, followed just as quickly by his pleas that he didn't do it, that a ghost killed his wife. And then I said, oh, that's easy. That's the perfect setup. Now I can insert my protagonist to come in and save the proverbial day. So after a Google search, which took all of a millisecond, and then about maybe 5 minutes of just thinking about it, I had a real high level, just general outline of what the next book in the series was going to be, and I was so excited about it that I had to write that story. It became the next story in my paranormal series. So what was really cool about doing that book was, like I said, I just kind of snatched this idea, ripped it out of the headlines, so to speak, and used it, kind of, turned it on its head a little bit and used it for my own purposes. And really, the story came almost fully formed. And you know what the major beats are of a story like that. So, you're thinking of a mystery where it opens with a murder, and then you've got your hero comes in and has to solve the murder, who actually committed the crime. And on top of that, it was also a legal thriller. So I had the wrong man was arrested. So are they going to get him off, or is he going to fry? So I've got all these major beats lined up within 5-10 minutes of just doing this simple Google search for ghost news stories, or whatever the search terms were. I can't remember now. That worked out just fantastic for me. So a lot of this, though, trying to come up with ideas for stories is just making it into kind of unconscious habit. If you want to be a writer, you want your brain to always be thinking at some level about stories and about ideas for stories. So really, it's not just waiting for the muse to drop in, because sometimes that can be a while. You want to kind of be more proactive about things. So you want to develop a habit. You are your habits, as the old saying goes. You want to develop a habit where you're forcing yourself to think about story ideas to the point where it just becomes second nature for you. And I'm 37 years old right now, and I've got enough ideas really that could last me the rest of my lifetime. Now, the trick for me is figuring out which ones are actually good ideas and which ones are actually bad ideas for stories. But that's probably for another video. But anyway, you want to develop this habit. You want to program your brain so that it is always running. There's an app running inside your brain on a subconscious level that's just looking for stories or thinking about stories or waiting for that idea to just surface that triggers something in your mind, and all of a sudden this complete story comes fully formed to you. So it's really about just developing a habit. So, how do you develop a habit? Well, unfortunately, it's very easy to develop bad habits and very difficult to develop good habits. I know this from personal experience. Bad habits are things that you don't even have to think about and you just start doing, and good habits are just the opposite. It seems to me, at least, that there are things you have to think about a lot to do them so that they actually turn into habits. So one of the things you can do is set up visual cues in your space, in your house, office, car, what have you, that will remind you, hey, now it's time to start thinking about story ideas right now. So maybe that's a sticky note on the bathroom mirror that just says story idea. Or maybe it's a sticky note that says, go read the news about this, whatever genre you're doing, whatever the subject matter of the books you want to write is. That's a trigger for you to remember to go and just look at the news, or go study some field, some theory, something that that's something that you want to write about, that you're interested in, that you can kind of develop into a story. So, a sticky note on a mirror. Another great visual cue is kind of the magic ink dot on your hand. I'm doing this myself for a habit I'm trying to develop. This is just a constant reminder for me. Every time I look down at my hand, I see this dot, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I got to do that. Let me do it right now. And then eventually, the idea is I won't have to think about it anymore. So I'll be doing it so much that it just becomes second nature. The habit is on autopilot, and I won't even need this anymore to remind me to do it. In terms of visual cues, sometimes it's good to associate kind of feelings or certain ideas with them as well that serve as reminders. I read a great interview with Chris Pratt, the actor, recently. He was talking about his process, how he gets himself kind of into character, and how he does it literally before each take. On one of his movies, I forget what the role was, he was using colored Post-it notes. I think the color was orange, but it doesn't matter. To him, the color orange signified how he was supposed to feel. So he would hang these sticky notes up on the set. So when they were shooting a particular scene, whenever his eyes, wandered around or he was looking around, he would see all those sticky notes that of the color he wanted. That would be a trigger for him to remember, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to be experiencing, or I'm supposed to be having this kind of emotion or feeling right now. So visual cues are really good tools to use to develop habits, just because that way you don't have to remember. All you have to do then is to focus on the habit, because just from my own history, I think that the hardest part about developing a habit is just remembering to develop a habit. Think back of your own history where you've wanted to do something, you've wanted to develop some kind of habit, and you tell yourself in the morning, okay, yes, I'm going to do this today. I'm really going to focus on this. And then you're laying down to go to bed that night, and you realize, oh, geez, I didn't do that at all today, and you have the best of intentions. You wanted to do it. You wanted to work on whatever it was. You just forgot. And I think that's the hardest part to developing a habit. So develop your creative habit where you're just forcing yourself to sit down every few minutes, or however long it is, a few minutes, a few times a day, where you're just thinking about story ideas. Maybe you're Googling the news, you're reading some kind of article that you were interested in. Use visual cues, use the ink dot, use post-it notes, colored stickies. Just have something visually out there that serves as the reminder, so you don't have to remember, and see if that works. And then you'll get into the habit, just kind of as you do this, where you don't have to think obviously anymore about, you don't have to remember, you don't have to think about doing it, you'll just kind of do it on your own. So, okay, enough about tip number 4, developing a habit to come up with ideas. If you haven't already, please click subscribe to this, to my channel. That way you can get the videos as I push them out. Any questions at all, please email me at ronaniswriting@gmail.com. I think that's it for today. Thanks, everybody.